Have you ever wondered what stunning secrets classic Hollywood tried to keep hidden? Our mind-blowing deep dive reveals 19 secret children born to legendary Golden Age icons. Learn how beloved stars like Clark Gable, Loretta Young, and Charlie Chaplin bent the truth to protect their reputations. From hidden children to secret affairs, here are the 16 secret children of the Golden Age celebrities. Hollywood's love child scandal of 1935, Clark Gable and Loretta Young. One of Tinseltown's most famous secret children was born in the mid-1930s. Clark Gable, known as the King of Hollywood, and Loretta Young, a devout Catholic actress famed for her wholesome image, co-starred in the 1935 film The Call of the Wild.
Realize what was wrong.
Well, as the intellectual member of this party, suppose you tell me.
Oh.
During filming on location, they had a brief affair that left Young pregnant. For an unmarried actress and a married leading man in 1935, an out-of-wedlock pregnancy was catastrophic to their careers. Young, adhering to her strict Catholic beliefs, refused an abortion, but she also knew having the baby openly would destroy both her and Gable's reputations. Thus began an elaborate deception that lasted decades. Loretta Young went into seclusion in late 1935 and secretly gave birth to a daughter in November. The infant, named Judy, was placed in an orphanage. Months later, Loretta staged a public adoption of an infant girl, presenting Judy as a child she was adopting from an agency. In reality, she was taking back her own baby. By this ruse, Loretta hoped to satisfy both her conscience and the Hollywood moral code. Judy was raised in Loretta's household, and the truth was tightly held. Judy was never told that Loretta was her biological mother until much later, and certainly not that the charming man who visited once was her real father, Clark Gable. The subterfuge succeeded for a long time. Young later married, and her husband, producer Tom Lewis, legally adopted Judy, giving her the last name Lewis. Hollywood insiders and gossip columnists had their suspicions. Judy's ears and smile looked remarkably like Gable's, and whispers followed the girl everywhere. But the public facade held. Gable met Judy only once, when she was 15. During a visit to Loretta's home in the 1950s, he charitably paid attention to the teen without ever acknowledging paternity. Judy herself didn't learn the truth until age 31, when in 1966, she confronted Loretta about the long-standing rumors. Finally, Loretta Young confessed that Judy Lewis was indeed her daughter with Clark Gable. Bound by shame, Loretta had maintained the lie for as long as possible. It was not until 2000, after both Gable and Young had died, that the full story was confirmed publicly. In her authorized biography, published that year, Loretta Young finally allowed the admission that Judy was her biological child by Gable. Judy Lewis herself had written a memoir in 1994 called Uncommon Knowledge, reflecting on the emotional pain of having her identity denied. The social implications of this case were significant. In the 1930s, the moral climate was such that an illegitimate child could end a career, so an elaborate charade was considered preferable to scandal. Loretta Young even had language to justify her deception, calling it a medical adoption. For Gable, acknowledging the child was never an option. As a major male star, he faced less immediate fallout, but an adultery scandal and a baby might have tarnished his man's man image. So Judy Lewis grew up in a shadowy half-truth, emblematic of many Hollywood children whose existence had to be papered over. When Senator Edwin Johnson denounced Hollywood's illicit sex lives on the Senate floor in 1950, one wonders if he knew of the Gable-Young cover-up. Hedy Lamarr's adopted son, a secret no more.
Do it.
All right, I'll do it for you.
Oh, no, you won't. Don't.
Is this the...
Stop it, Bill.
All right.
You leave.
Glamorous 1940s star Hedy Lamarr had a secret that even her own son didn't learn until middle age. Lamarr, famed as the most beautiful woman in film,
Don't you understand? My father, a home, freedom, a dream I've had for 10 years.
also an inventor, gave birth to a baby boy in 1939. At the time, she was between marriages. She had divorced her first husband and shortly after married screenwriter Gene Markey. To avoid the scandal of an out-of-wedlock baby, Lamarr claimed the child was adopted during her marriage to Markey. She named the infant James Lamarr Markey, and for years maintained that he was an orphan she had taken in. In reality, baby James's father was actor John Loder, whom Lamarr married a few years later as her third husband. But by the time Lamarr and Loder wed, little James had been sent off to boarding school and virtually cut off from Lamarr's life. In a heartbreaking twist, Lamarr abandoned her pretense entirely. Once she had 2 more children with Loder in the 1940s, she pushed James away. At age 11, he was informed he was adopted and sent to school in New York, rarely seeing his mother thereafter. Growing up, James felt unloved and estranged. Lamarr reportedly told him, "You're no longer my son. Goodbye," effectively disowning him as a child. It was only after Lamarr's death in 2000 that the full truth emerged. Investigative journalists and an inquiry by Talk magazine uncovered James's original birth certificate, which showed his birth name as James Lamarr Loder and listed Hedy Lamarr as his mother and John Loder as father. The adoption had been a fabrication. Lamarr's daughter Denise confirmed that their mother simply found James difficult and could not cope. But even she hadn't known James was biologically theirs until later. Essentially, Lamarr went so far as to deceive her own son about his origins to avoid embarrassment, and perhaps to satisfy her then-husband Markey. When the story broke in 2001 in the New York Post, it was presented as a shocking Hollywood secret. Heady News, Lamarr's son not adopted, blared the headline. By then, society could greet the revelation with sympathy for James rather than scorn for Lamarr. But in Lamarr's heyday, had it been known that her adopted son was actually born out of wedlock, it might have seriously harmed her standing. The studio system's strictures on actresses were such that Lamarr felt compelled to maintain the lie to everyone, including possibly even her later husbands. This case underscores the extreme of Hollywood image management. A star going so far as to relinquish her child to preserve her career and personal narrative. James's quiet persistence in finding the truth finally vindicated his instincts that there was more to the story. It's a poignant reminder that behind the sparkling images on screen, real lives were profoundly shaped and sometimes damaged by the demands of secrecy. Jerry Lewis, a daughter kept in the shadows. Comedy icon.
He had the big, long nose. They cut it off. Chopped it off. Now he's walking around as a big...
Jerry Lewis, who rose to fame as one half of the Martin and Lewis duo, and later as star of films like The Nutty Professor, was known for his zany on-screen persona. Off-screen, he cultivated an image as a family man, especially in his later years. But for decades, Lewis refused to acknowledge an illicit daughter, a secret child who lived in obscurity while her father basked in Hollywood's glow. In the early 1950s, Jerry Lewis had an affair with a model named Lynn Dixon. From that relationship, a daughter, Susan, was born around 1952 or 1953. Jerry Lewis was married to his first wife Patty at the time and had sons with her. He made no public mention of Susan and did not take part in raising her. In fact, as Susan grew up, struggling with life and even experiencing homelessness, Lewis steadfastly denied she was his child. Susan Minaret spent years reaching out, trying to get her famous father's recognition. She bore a striking resemblance to him. By her 60s, she was described as a dead ringer for Jerry, often dressing in a tuxedo and red tie, like his comedic character, to draw attention to her plight. But Lewis would not budge. Friends and colleagues who knew the situation urged him to at least meet or help her, but he was resolute. Even after a paternity test in the 1990s reportedly indicated a high probability that she was his, Jerry Lewis kept publicly silent. It wasn't until after Jerry Lewis died in 2017 that the extent of his estrangement from Susan became widely known. He pointedly left her out of his will. Susan spoke to the media then, expressing that she had learned of his death the same way the world did, via news reports. Why such coldness? In the buttoned-up 1950s, acknowledging a child out of wedlock could have ruined Jerry's hugely lucrative partnership with Dean Martin and his burgeoning movie career. So, the secret was kept. Some of Jerry's children, by his first marriage, later speculated that their father's narcissism and desire to control his image were factors. He simply did not want to deal with a child he hadn't planned or publicly claimed. Culturally, Jerry Lewis's treatment of Susan reflects the era's double standard and secrecy. Here was a man who hosted telethons for Jerry's Kids every year, celebrated for his charity, yet he appeared to show no charity to his own flesh and blood living in poverty. In the 1950s and 60s, this contradiction stayed hidden. It was an open secret among some in Hollywood, but Jerry's clout kept it mostly hushed. For Susan, the personal toll was immense. She spent much of her adult life seeking validation, to the point of legally changing her last name to Lewis. She never received financial support from him. In interviews, she recalled standing outside a Philadelphia theater, where Jerry was performing in 2005, holding a sign reading, "Jerry Lewis is my father," and being ignored. The social mood had changed enough by the 21st century that many found Jerry's behavior cruel. Articles in the Daily Beast and other outlets highlighted Susan's story as an example of Hollywood's bygone cruelty. A star who could make the world laugh, yet allegedly cruelly ignored his homeless daughter. The implication was that such a thing would be unacceptable today, but in mid-century America, it was swept under the rug. Jerry Lewis's legacy, as a result, has a blot on it from this revelation. While he isn't here to defend or explain his actions, Susan's persistence ensured that her existence is finally part of the narrative. In a broader context, her story is a sobering reminder that not all secret children eventually get embraced or acknowledged. Some remain ghostly footnotes, fighting for recognition. In Jerry's day, the studios and the media were often complicit in hiding these inconvenient lives. Susan Lewis had to wait until the era of tell-all memoirs and tabloid candor to have her voice heard. By sharing her truth, she not only claimed her place in her father's story, but also shone a light on the human impact of Hollywood's old practice of cover-ups. The Babe's secret adoption, Babe Ruth and Dorothy Ruth. In the Roaring '20s, baseball legend Babe Ruth was as famous as any movie star. Off the field, Ruth's personal life was tumultuous. In 1921, while married to his first wife Helen, Ruth had an affair with a friend of the family, Juanita Jennings, resulting in the birth of a baby girl. To avoid scandal, Babe persuaded Helen that they should adopt the infant, without revealing that he was the child's biological father. The baby, named Dorothy Helen Ruth, was presented as an orphaned child they rescued. Helen raised Dorothy largely on her own after she and Babe separated. Dorothy grew up thinking Babe was merely her adoptive father, though he remained a loving presence. In an ironic twist, Juanita Jennings stayed in Dorothy's life as a friend of the family, never letting on that she was actually the girl's mother. The truth only emerged in 1980 when Juanita was dying and confessed that Dorothy was her daughter and Babe's. By then, Babe Ruth had been dead for over 3 decades, and Dorothy was 59 years old. The revelation of her parentage came as a shock, causing a rift between Dorothy and her stepsister Julia. Dorothy later wrote a memoir, My Dad, the Babe, to explain her unique upbringing and how the secret had been kept for so long. This case shows how even in the freewheeling 1920s, an illegitimate child of a public figure had to be concealed through adoption to avoid public moral outrage. Babe Ruth's immense fame meant any hint of scandal could tarnish his all-American hero image, so the truth of Dorothy's birth was buried for nearly 60 years. San Simeon's secret daughter, Marion Davies, and Patricia Van Cleve Lake.
Oh, you're common.
I may be common, but I don't pick up with that kind of trash.
Who are you? Why are you here?
You telling me?
In the 1920s and 30s, actress Marion Davies was a Hollywood luminary and the longtime mistress of publishing tycoon William Randolph Hearst. The pair's lavish lifestyle was the stuff of legend. Yet for decades, Hollywood whispered about a mysterious young girl in their orbit named Patricia Van Cleve, introduced as Marion's niece. In reality, Patricia was widely believed to be the secret love child of Davies and Hearst, born out of wedlock around 1923. According to family lore, later recounted by Patricia herself, Marion became pregnant during one of her European trips. Hearst, whose wife refused him a divorce, sent Marion to a Catholic hospital in France to give birth in secret. The infant Patricia was then handed to Marion's sister Rose to raise as her own, using the cover story of Rose having adopted the baby after losing an infant of her own. Hearst continued to financially support the child and even advanced Rose's husband in his media company, while Patricia grew up not knowing her true parentage. She spent her youth in luxury, all the while resembling Hearst in looks in a way that some found striking. The secret was an open one among insiders. Patricia later recounted that when she was 11, Marion tearfully confessed that, "Your father is the chief, William Randolph Hearst," swearing her to secrecy. Hearst himself privately acknowledged Patricia as his on her wedding day in 1937, but publicly the fiction was maintained. It was only decades later, in 1993, that Patricia chose to set the record straight. In a deathbed statement and obituary notice, she declared she was the only daughter of famed movie star Marion Davies and famed publisher William Randolph Hearst. The belated revelation caused a stir. Some Hearst family skeptics protested the lack of paper proof, but many believed what had been suspected all along. This hidden child story underscores the extreme measures Hollywood figures took to avoid scandal in the early 20th century. For Hearst and Davies, having a child out of wedlock in that conservative era was unthinkable to admit publicly. Instead, they constructed an elaborate cover-up, one that held for over 60 years, illustrating how firmly the taboo of illegitimacy was enforced in Golden Age Hollywood social circles. A royal rumor from the 1920s. Prince George and Kiki Preston's child.
Swinton and Colonel Lindbergh were present.
The government has started great schemes.
The heroine was there too, Mrs. Nanny Lyle.
Not only film stars felt compelled to hide illicit offspring. Prince George, the Duke of Kent, a dashing British royal, moved in the same high society circles that intersected with Hollywood's elite. In the 1920s, he carried on a scandalous affair with an American socialite, Alice Kiki Preston, infamous in the press as the girl with the silver syringe for her drug habits. Their liaison gave rise to a persistent rumor that Kiki bore Prince George a son in 1926. According to the memoirs of the Duchess of Westminster, even George's own brother believed the tale, identifying the child as Michael Temple Canfield. Michael, born in 1926, was quietly adopted and raised by an American family. As an adult, he moved in elite circles himself, never knowing he was allegedly of royal blood. Though never officially acknowledged and lacking definitive proof, the Duke of Kent's rumored love child was widely gossiped about. A discreet mention in Prince George's biographies notes that, in addition to his legitimate children, he was said to have had a son by Kiki Preston. Such a suggestion would have been explosive for the staid British royal family of that era. Indeed, Prince George's life was marked by hushed-up excess. The possible existence of an out-of-wedlock son was never admitted by the royals. It demonstrates that the impulse to suppress scandals crossed domains. In monarchies and Hollywood alike, image was everything. For decades, the Preston Hearst baby story remained a tantalizing footnote, and Michael Canfield went to his grave in 1969, unaware of the whispers about his parentage. The royal establishment's silence on the matter is unsurprising. As with film studios, the Crown's strategy was denial and obfuscation to avoid public furor. This case, though speculative, fits the pattern of the times. Rumors of another Gable offspring, the David Janssen legend. Clark Gable's charisma was so large that multiple paternity rumors swirled around him.
You? Don't make me laugh.
Next time you drop in, bring your folks.
In addition to his confirmed daughter Judy Lewis, a persistent Hollywood legend held that TV actor David Janssen was Gable's secret son. Janssen was born in 1931 to Bernice Janssen, a former Ziegfeld showgirl. No father was listed on his birth certificate, and throughout David's life, whispers followed him that he bore a resemblance to Gable. The talk was fueled by the fact that Bernice had known Gable in the late 1920s. According to actress Debbie Reynolds, who was a close friend of Janssen's, David himself believed Gable was his biological father. In her memoir, Unsinkable, Reynolds wrote that Janssen confided this belief to her, though he had no definitive proof. This rumor was never confirmed, and Gable never acknowledged any such child. Yet it shows how in mid-century Hollywood, even unverified secrets could capture the public imagination. Janssen did idolize Gable, and even had similarly prominent ears and a matching charm. Comedian Will Jordan recalled sitting with David Janssen once and noticing how mesmerized Janssen was watching a Gable impersonation, as if pondering the resemblance. The rumor that he was Gable's illegitimate son was well known in showbiz circles and to Janssen himself. He never publicly claimed Gable as his father, perhaps out of respect for his legal father or simply lack of evidence. Gable, for his part, denied other paternity claims in court. Notably, he was sued in 1937 by a British woman, Violet Norton, who claimed he'd fathered her child. Gable vehemently fought that case and won. With Janssen, no lawsuit was ever filed. It remained an intriguing rumor. The cultural subtext here is that a love child of Clark Gable was almost a romantic notion to the public. The idea that Hollywood's most virile star might have seeded unknown heirs. It also reflects the reality that many starlets and women in Gable's orbit did have to handle pregnancies quietly, whether through hush-hush adoptions or, in Bernice Janssen's case, raising a child alone. In the more permissive decades after Hollywood's golden era, such a rumor might have been openly explored, but in Janssen's mid-century lifetime, it remained shrouded in ambiguity. His case, true or not, is often listed among Hollywood's enduring mysteries, underlining how the mystique of secret children can linger when official truth is absent. Even today, fans speculate, but as one columnist put it, it will likely never be verified. Concealed by a studio, Ingrid Bergman's Exile for Love. In 1950, Hollywood was rocked by a scandal not of a hidden child, but a very public extramarital pregnancy that the studios wished could have been hidden. Swedish actress Ingrid Bergman was beloved for her roles in films like Casablanca.
But what about us? When I said I would never leave you.
Embodying purity and grace on screen. But when Bergman fell in love with Italian director Roberto Rossellini and became pregnant with his child while still married to her first husband, the backlash was swift and severe. Unlike other cases here, Bergman did not conceal her condition. She openly left her husband, bore Rossellini a son in 1950, and later married Rossellini. The public reaction, however, showed why so many of her peers chose secrecy. U.S. Senator Edwin Johnson took to the Senate floor to denounce Bergman as a horrible example of womanhood and an instrument of evil for having an illegitimate child. She was condemned by religious groups and essentially exiled from Hollywood. No studio would hire her. The press dubbed her newborn son Roberto the love child that shocked the nation. Orson Welles' hidden son, Geraldine Fitzgerald, and Michael Lindsay Hogg. Even the great Orson Welles, Hollywood's wunderkind director, actor of Citizen Kane,
To see to it the decent, hard-working people in this community aren't robbed blind by a pack of money-mad pirates just because they haven't anybody to look after their interests.
was entangled in a paternity secret that remained mostly under wraps until decades later. In the early 1940s, Welles was married to his first wife, Virginia Nicholson, but he had a brief affair with actress Geraldine Fitzgerald, a striking Irish starlet known for Wuthering Heights. Fitzgerald was herself married. In 1943, she gave birth to a son, Michael Lindsay Hogg, who was ostensibly the child of her husband Sir Edward. The truth, however, was suspected. Within Fitzgerald's circle, it was whispered that Orson Welles was Michael's biological father. Geraldine never publicly admitted this, but clues abounded. The two families lived near each other as the boy grew up, and Michael often played with Welles's daughter Christopher, his supposed half-sister. Fitzgerald and Welles had cleverly arranged proximity under the guise of friendship. Michael Lindsay Hogg grew up to become a successful film and theater director in Britain. Only in his 40s did he start to seriously question his parentage. In a scene almost cinematic, his mother Geraldine vehemently denied the rumors a bit too emphatically, raising Michael's suspicions. Family friend Gloria Vanderbilt finally confided to Michael that indeed Orson Welles was his father, confirming what had been long rumored. A DNA test was attempted in the 2010s, but it came back inconclusive, though Michael himself is convinced of his Welles heritage. During Welles's lifetime, this secret was well guarded. Welles never acknowledged Michael as his son publicly. For Fitzgerald, a single indiscretion could have meant social and career ruin in the 1940s. So she maintained the polite fiction that Michael's father was her husband, Sir Edward. The social implications were significant. Welles's playboy reputation might have survived another illegitimate child, but Fitzgerald's standing as a proper lady of Hollywood and London required silence. Thus, the two families colluded in blending their children's upbringing, never speaking the truth. Michael Lindsay Hogg later reflected on the strangeness of growing up alongside his half-sister without knowing it. In his 2011 autobiography, he wrote that the mystery was finally resolved by Vanderbilt's testimony. This case did not explode into scandal at the time. It was a quieter secret than some others, perhaps because Welles was not under the thumb of a single studio, and Fitzgerald was not a household name star. Yet it typifies the era's ethos. Better to let a child live a whole life without knowing his true father than let a messy affair become public. As Michael himself said, he believes Welles was his father, and that persistent rumors and evidence make it a strong possibility, although biographers remain slightly dubious due to timeline discrepancies. Regardless, the story of Michael Lindsay Hogg stands as a poignant example of a hidden Hollywood heir. The heiress of two worlds, John Huston's unlikely daughter. Sometimes a hidden child's story has a bittersweet, even heartwarming resolution. Such is the tale of Allegra Huston, born in 1964 into a complicated web of relationships. Allegra's mother, ballerina Enrica "Ricky" Soma, was the fourth wife of famed director John Huston. By the early 1960s, John and Enrica were estranged, each with separate love affairs, despite not yet divorcing. Enrica became pregnant by Viscount John Julius Norwich, an English aristocrat and historian. Knowing that Norwich would not leave his wife, and that bearing a child out of wedlock could be scandalous, Enrica planned to raise the baby alone. Tragically, when Allegra was only 5, Enrica Soma died in a car accident in 1969. At that point, in an act that surprised many, John Huston stepped up to adopt and raise Allegra as his own, even though she was the product of his wife's affair. Huston, who had children from other marriages, brought young Allegra into his eclectic family and homes around the world. For years, Allegra believed Huston was her biological father. It wasn't until she was 12, living in Los Angeles with Huston's fifth wife, that the truth burst forth. During a bitter argument, her stepmother Cece told Allegra, "John isn't really your father. Your real father is an English lord. He's coming tomorrow." One can imagine Allegra's disorientation. The man she adored as dad was not her blood parent after all. The next day, she was introduced to Viscount Norwich, which only deepened her confusion. Allegra Huston has since written movingly about this experience in her memoir, Love Child, a memoir of family lost and found. She describes the emotional whiplash of being effectively introduced to a father at age 12, and the sense of not belonging that ensued. Yet, she ultimately embraces both her fathers, the nurturing adoptive father John Huston, who gave her a home, and her biological father Norwich, who, while never a day-to-day parent, cared about her future. Culturally, Allegra's story is unique because the usual Hollywood impulse to cover up the affair baby was actually inverted. John Huston publicly took responsibility for a child that was not his. In doing so, he shielded young Allegra from a potentially uncertain fate. Huston's stature allowed him to weather any whispers about Allegra's true paternity. Indeed, the press in the 1970s rarely, if ever, pried into the exact parentage. Only later did Allegra learn the full truth, illustrating a different aspect of hidden children. Sometimes the secret is kept within the family for the child's own perceived good. As Allegra reflected, she had 2 kind, generous fathers, and a wealth of siblings and love, despite the convoluted start to her life. The social implications by the mid-1960s had begun to evolve, but for a man of Huston's generation, claiming another man's child as his own was still an extraordinary, reputation-risking act. It earned him quiet respect. Allegra's dual identity also symbolizes a bridging of worlds, old Hollywood and British nobility. Unlike many in this list, her story did not break as a scandal splashed in tabloids. It unfurled gently through a memoir, showing the personal, private side of what being a love child meant for the child herself. In her words, she eventually realized she was a child of love, conceived in a grand romance, but not abandoned. Jack Nicholson, brother, sister, mother. Not all secret children in Hollywood were the offspring of famous pairings. Sometimes the celebrity was the secret child.
I'll tell you, Roar, I don't know what it is about you, but you do bring out the devil.
Oscar-winning actor Jack Nicholson discovered in the 1970s that his own family history was a lie crafted to avoid stigma.
We had Jim Brooks, Maria Kavanaugh, Christy Zia, Bridget Johnson.
Nicholson was born in 1937 to June Frances Nicholson, a teenaged showgirl in New Jersey. June was unmarried and just 17 at the time. To cover up the illegitimacy, June's parents agreed to raise baby Jack as their own son, and Jack was brought up believing June was his older sister. It was an elaborate familial charade, common in an earlier era when teenage pregnancy was deeply shameful for families. Jack's mother June went along with this fiction and pursued her dancing career, while big sister June and mom raised Jack in a small-town environment. For 37 years, Nicholson had no idea. The truth finally came out in 1974 when Time magazine researchers were preparing a cover story on Jack, who had risen to major stardom by then. In verifying biographical details, Time reporters uncovered the family secret, and they astonishingly informed Jack Nicholson that his sister June was actually his mother. By then, June and Ethel had both passed away, leaving Jack no opportunity to hear the story directly from them or ask why they kept it hidden so long. Nicholson handled the revelation with equanimity. He later said it was a pretty dramatic event, but it wasn't what I'd call traumatizing. I was pretty well psychologically formed by that age. In other words, discovering his true parentage changed his understanding of his past, but not his sense of self. The social reason behind this deception was the classic one. In 1937, a child born out of wedlock to a teenager in a Catholic family would have been scorned. To save face, Jack's grandparents simply pretended he was their son. Such cases were not uncommon in mid-century America. Many families quietly adopted their daughter's children. What's remarkable is the secret held for decades, even as Nicholson became a public figure. It speaks to the integrity of friends and relatives around him in Neptune, New Jersey, that nobody leaked it. Only diligent journalism unearthed it. When Time broke the news to Nicholson, he also learned that the identity of his biological father was uncertain. June Nicholson had had relationships with at least two men at the time. One was Don Furcio, whom she married in haste, only to find he was already married. Another possibility was a man named Edgar Kirschfeld, a.k.a. Eddie King, her manager. June took the father's name to her grave. Nicholson, characteristically zen, chose not to investigate further, saying he didn't feel the need to know which man it was. Culturally, Jack Nicholson's case, revealed in the freewheeling 1970s, became a trivia note rather than a scandal. A far cry from how it would have been received had it come out in the 1940s. It illustrates a generational shift. By the 70s, Hollywood could accept that one of its biggest stars was born illegitimate without moral judgment. In fact, the story only added to Nicholson's mystique. But for his mother June, back in 1937, the decision to hide Jack's true parentage was born of the harsh social mores of the Depression era. It's a reminder that behind some of Hollywood's brightest talents lay personal histories shaped by the need to escape censure. Nicholson has expressed empathy for June's situation, understanding that she did what she thought best for him. His easy acceptance of the truth when it came out signaled how far societal attitudes had evolved since his birth. Charlie Chaplin's trial and a child of the state. While many secret children were successfully hidden for years, one case in the 1940s played out very publicly and ended up changing American law. Charlie Chaplin, the silent film icon, became embroiled in a sensational paternity suit over a child he insisted was not his. In 1943, an unstable young actress named Joan Barry gave birth to a baby girl, Carol Ann, and claimed Chaplin was the father after a brief affair. Chaplin, who was in his 50s and recently remarried to Una O'Neill, vehemently denied paternity. In fact, blood tests proved Chaplin could not be the father. Chaplin had type O blood, Barry was type A, and baby Carol Ann was type B, an impossible combination biologically. However, at the time, California law did not allow blood test results as admissible evidence in paternity cases. The jury in the 1945 trial saw Chaplin as a philanderer and was swayed by Barry's testimony of their relations. In a stunning verdict, they found Chaplin to be the father, and he was ordered to pay child support for little Carol Ann. The case was a tabloid sensation. It tarnished Chaplin's reputation, painting him in the press as a lecherous older man. One columnist called him a little runt of a Svengali, and another a gray-haired old buzzard, corrupting young women. This scandal, combined with other political issues, contributed to Chaplin's decision to leave the U.S. in 1952. Yet, out of the fiasco came a positive legal reform. The highly unjust outcome spurred changes. In 1953, California passed the Uniform Act on blood tests to determine paternity, mandating that if experts agreed the blood tests ruled a man out, the case should be dismissed. In short, Chaplin's ordeal helped modernize paternity law so that science could prevail over assumption and moralism. From the perspective of hidden children, Carol Ann Barry was not Chaplin's child, but in the eyes of the world for a time, she was thought to be Charlie Chaplin's secret daughter. The irony is that Chaplin did have a number of children out of wedlock in his younger years, but he handled those by hastily marrying the mothers. In 1918, he married teenage actress Mildred Harris when she became pregnant. In 1924, he infamously married 16-year-old Lita Gray when she became pregnant, resulting in 2 sons. Those children were kept legitimate by marriage, a strategy to avoid scandal. By the 1940s, an older Chaplin perhaps assumed his relationship with Joan Barry would not produce a child, but when she appeared with one, the studio and public were ready to believe the worst of him given his past. The cultural implications here were significant. Chaplin's open courtroom battle over Carol Ann revealed how unforgiving the climate still was toward perceived sexual misconduct. Chaplin was criminally charged under the Mann Act before the paternity trial, though he was acquitted of that. Still, the damage was done. The spectacle of the world's most recognizable movie clown entangled in a paternity suit fascinated and repelled the public. In a way, Chaplin's case is the flip side of Loretta Young's. Instead of quietly hiding a real child, Chaplin loudly fought against a child who wasn't his. Both cases underscore the era's obsession with morality. For Carol Ann, the little girl at the center, her paternity might have been legally settled as Chaplin's, but she faded from headlines after childhood. Chaplin left America and never met her again. The legacy of the case lives on in legal textbooks and Hollywood lore, a reminder that truth is sometimes stranger than fiction, and that the image of a star could be jeopardized as much by a false claim as by a real secret child. Jane Russell's Irish adoption controversy. Not every hidden child saga involved illegitimacy. In some cases, the secrecy or scandal arose from adoptions that defied social expectations.
That's just who I am, all right. But my friends call me Lorelai.
Baby, remember you're my baby.
Golden Age bombshell.
Honey, you'll hurt yourself.
Did anyone ever tell you what big blue eyes you have, Grandma?
Jane Russell nearly saw her career wrecked in the early 1950s when she pursued an overseas adoption. Russell and her husband, football star Bob Waterfield, had fertility issues and had already adopted a baby girl in the U.S. Yearning for another child, in 1951, Russell arranged to adopt a baby boy from an unwed mother in London, an Irish-born infant named Thomas. When news of this private adoption leaked to the press, a firestorm erupted. The notion of a Hollywood star essentially shopping for a baby abroad struck many as improper. The child's birth mother, Hannah McDermott, found herself besieged by reporters in England, and the story made international headlines. Hollywood gossip columnists and the public raised eyebrows. Was this even legal? Why not adopt an American baby? The situation was exacerbated by the fact that a black market baby ring had recently been exposed, making any unconventional adoption seem suspect. Jane Russell faced a ton of bad publicity. Her studio head, the eccentric billionaire Howard Hughes, was furious. He reportedly thought the negative press around the adoption would finish Russell's career, and he ordered her to give the child back. This is remarkable, a studio exerting pressure on an actress to reverse adoption for the sake of PR. But Jane Russell, known for her strong will, refused. She stood on her ground and kept baby Thomas, raising him as her son. The social implications were twofold. First, Russell's reputation took a temporary hit. Some conservative fan groups felt it unseemly that she had effectively bypassed normal channels. Second, it spotlighted the obstacles in adoption laws. At the time, U.S. citizens had difficulty adopting foreign children, and unmarried mothers in places like Ireland often had limited options but to give up babies in secret. Russell's high-profile case indirectly helped highlight these issues. She actually had to arrange with an airline pilot friend to smuggle the infant Thomas into the U.S. under a false identity to complete the adoption, since legal avenues were convoluted. Happily, the storm subsided, and Jane Russell continued her career with relatively little long-term damage. But for a moment, she experienced the Hollywood machine's lack of sympathy regarding children. Just as studios would hide a birth out of wedlock, they would also readily sacrifice an innocent adoption if it didn't play well in Peoria. Russell later said of the incident that the criticism, all sorts of grief, caused her, but that she believed the birth mother truly acted out of love for her child's future. Indeed, a local historian noted that Hannah McDermott likely offered her baby to Russell because she believed he'd have a better life. In the end, Jane Russell became an advocate for adoption. She helped found an organization to place orphan children with Christian families. Her son Thomas grew up well, a testament to her instinct to protect him. This case adds a different dimension to secret children in Hollywood. It wasn't Jane's biological child that was hidden, but rather the process of how she acquired him that was kept quiet until it exploded in public. It shows that even doing a good deed could be twisted in Hollywood's glare, requiring steely resolve from a star to withstand the pressure. Russell's firm stance saved her son from becoming a footnote in Hollywood scandal archives. Instead, he remained where he belonged, in her family. Little Satchmo, Louis Armstrong's unacknowledged daughter. Hollywood's golden age overlaps with the golden age of American popular music, and one of that era's biggest musical stars harbored a secret child for decades. Jazz legend Louis Armstrong, famous for his gravelly-voiced songs and trumpet solos.
I see skies of blue, wonderful world. Come by, baby.
Projected a genial public image and often claimed he had no children. Privately, however, Armstrong did have a daughter, Sharon Preston, born in 1955 to Lucille Sweets. Preston, a dancer and singer from Harlem, with whom Armstrong had a long-running affair. At the time, Armstrong was married to his fourth wife. Fearing damage to his reputation and personal life, Armstrong never publicly acknowledged Sharon as his child during his lifetime. Despite not declaring her, Armstrong did maintain a relationship with Sharon behind closed doors. He would visit and spend time with her and her mother, helping support them. But these interactions were kept out of the spotlight. Sharon grew up understanding who her father was, yet also understanding that it had to remain a profound secret to the outside world. In the 1950s and 60s, for a globally famous African-American entertainer, to admit to an extramarital child could have been career suicide. It might have angered his fan base or given fodder to detractors who resented his success. Moreover, Armstrong came from a generation where personal matters were kept very discreet, especially in the conservative climate of mid-century America. Sharon Preston remained silent about her parentage until long after Armstrong's death in 1971. Finally, in 2012, she went public with her story in a memoir titled Little Satchmo, and in a recent documentary of the same name. She described the pain of living in the shadows, having a father who loved her the best way he could, yet never claiming her openly. Armstrong, according to Sharon, felt he simply couldn't own up to having a child out of wedlock while being married. In one of his private taped recordings, he mentioned Sharon affectionately but resignedly, saying he was providing for her financially. The public only learned of Sharon's existence when she came forward. The cultural resonance of this revelation is significant. For decades, Armstrong's official biographies all stated he had no offspring, upholding the myth of Pops as a man devoted only to his music and wives. That the world's most famous jazz musician had to hide his daughter speaks volumes about both race and celebrity in his era. As a black man who broke many barriers in entertainment, Armstrong may have felt an extra burden to appear unimpeachable in character. Any scandal could have given fuel to those who sought to undermine him or jazz in general. The civil rights struggles of the 50s and 60s also form a backdrop. Armstrong was sometimes criticized by activists for being too cautious. Little did anyone know he was cautiously guarding his family secret as well. When Sharon's story finally emerged, it added a new layer to Armstrong's legacy. Rather than tarnish him, many fans saw it as a touching, if bittersweet, chapter. Armstrong did fulfill a father's role privately, though constrained by his times from doing so publicly. Sharon noted that he loved her the best way he could, under the circumstances. Her decision to tell her story reflects changing attitudes. By the 21st century, there was empathy and understanding for the personal sacrifices made by figures like Armstrong. It also gave Sharon, who had lived in the shadows, a chance to claim her history and identity openly. In a broader sense, Armstrong's hidden child is part of a pattern wherein African American entertainers felt compelled to hide extramarital relationships, perhaps even more stringently than their white counterparts, due to societal scrutiny. Sharon Preston Fulta's journey from secret daughter to memoirist underscores the human cost of those showbiz secrets. An American Hero's Double Life. Charles Lindbergh's Hidden Children. Stepping outside Hollywood, but still within the mid-century zeitgeist, even national heroes were not immune to secret family dramas. Charles Lindbergh, the aviator who became a global celebrity,
airplanes in 1922. After learning to fly, wing walker, that is, someone who stood on the wings of a plane.
After his solo transatlantic flight in 1927, carefully cultivated an image of upright Americana. He married Anne Morrow, had a highly publicized tragedy when their infant son was kidnapped and killed in 1932, and went on to have 5 more children with Anne. Yet Lindbergh harbored a monumental secret. Starting in the 1950s, he fathered a second family in Europe entirely unknown to his wife and the public. In Germany, Lindbergh conducted long-term affairs with 3 women and had a total of 7 children between 1958 and 1967. This clandestine chapter remained hidden until 2003, when 3 of those secret German children, Astrid, Dirk, and David Heschheimer, came forward with evidence that Lindbergh was their father. They had letters and photographs from Caro Kent, the pseudonym Lindbergh used in Europe, and ultimately, DNA tests confirmed the truth. The blood of the lone eagle ran in their veins. The story made headlines worldwide, astonishing those who remembered Lindbergh as an icon of integrity. It turned out Lindbergh had quietly visited his European mistresses and children for years, all the way up to his death in 1974, without his American family suspecting a thing. He kept the relationships entirely separate. The Lindbergh revelation, coming so many years later, was met not with outrage, but with a kind of morbid fascination. People asked, how could someone so famous pull this off? What did it say about him? In Lindbergh's case, he was long dead when the secret surfaced, so there were no career consequences. But it reframed historical understanding of him. It appears Lindbergh, disillusioned with aspects of his American life, sought solace in Europe. He imposed secrecy on the German families. The children recall being told never to reveal who their father was to anyone. Culturally, it highlighted the difference between mid-20th century and today. Back then, Friends and mistresses obeyed his wish for privacy, and without today's media glare or genetic testing, it was possible for a public figure to live a true double life. In a sense, Lindbergh's hidden children belong to the same era as the Hollywood cases, an era when the reputation of a public hero was paramount, and personal indiscretions were buried deep. If Lindbergh's infidelities had been exposed in, say, the 1960s, it could have been a major scandal. By keeping it secret, Lindbergh preserved his image during his lifetime. The cost, of course, was borne by those children who grew up without ever publicly claiming their famous father. They reportedly only learned who he was after he died, when he left behind a request that they not disclose it until after the death of his American wife, Anne. Indeed, they waited. This extraordinary tale from another domain echoes the Hollywood themes: the compartmentalization of personal truth for the sake of public image, and the emotional impact on the hidden children. The Heshamer siblings expressed that they came forward for closure and acknowledgement, not money. Their coming out gave them identity and allowed them to openly take pride in their lineage. For historians and the public, it added complexity to Lindbergh's portrait, proving that even the era's paragons could have feet of clay, and it proved that secrets, even those maintained for decades, have a way of emerging once the strictures of the past fall away. Lindbergh's secret progeny are a reminder that the phenomenon of concealed children was not confined to Hollywood, but was part of a broader cultural pattern in the early to mid-20th century, spanning continents and social strata. The legacy of Hollywood's hidden children.
Always swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Are you a member of the Communist Party? It's a shameful and cowardly act.
Il faut bien avoir...
From movie stars to musicians to national icons, the cases of secret children during the Golden Age period reveal a common thread: the tension between private reality and public image. In a time when the moral expectations on public figures were stringent, the birth of a child under less than ideal circumstances often had to be managed with subterfuge. Studios arranged cover adoptions. Lovers separated and concocted elaborate plans. Sometimes the truth was known to many, but spoken by none. These 19 cases show the variety of outcomes. Some children, like Judy Lewis or Patricia Lake, eventually learned the truth and even shared it with the world, finding a sense of peace and identity. Others, like Susan Lewis or some of Lindbergh's children, struggled with the absence of acknowledgement, their sense of self perhaps forever colored by being kept a secret. And intriguingly, a few, like Allegra Huston and Jack Nicholson, illustrate that occasionally these secrets were kept for the child's benefit. The social and cultural implications of these stories were significant in their day. They influenced how legislation evolved, how adoption protocols were scrutinized, and how the conversation about morality and celebrity progressed. By the late 20th century, the taboo around illegitimacy had diminished to the point where stars like Madonna or Angelina Jolie could have children outside traditional marriage without career-ending fallout. That freedom was built on the back of a time when things were very different. When, for instance, an actress of Loretta Young's stature felt compelled to hide her baby for decades, or a man as powerful as Hearst still feared public scorn enough to concoct a lifelong lie about his daughter. Hollywood's hidden children also tell a more intimate, human story. They remind us that behind the billboards and smiles were individuals grappling with hard choices. A frightened young mother like June Nicholson, handing her baby to her parents and pretending to be his sister. Or a conflicted father like Louis Armstrong, trying to do right by his secret daughter without upending his marriage. Many of these scenarios involved painful personal sacrifice. Mothers giving up daily motherhood, fathers foregoing closeness or recognition, children growing up with unanswered questions. Yet, there is also resilience in these tales. Judy Lewis grew into a gracious adult who forgave her mother. Michael Lindsay Hogg carved out his own successful career while navigating his ambiguous lineage. Allegra Huston found grace and wisdom in reflecting on her two fathers and two worlds. As a historical narrative, the phenomenon of Hollywood's secret children underscores how far societal norms have shifted. What was once scandalous is now often met with empathy. Today, DNA tests and tell-all interviews have largely ended the era of superstar paternity mysteries. But fascination endures, as evidenced by renewed interest in these old cases through books, documentaries, and even deathbed confessions. They are, in a sense, Hollywood's real-life melodramas.
I thought it was a poor adaptation of Stephen King's novel. It wasn't exciting, it was overly long, as yes, sometimes the characters do feel cold and disconnected.
In shining a respectful spotlight on these 19 stories, we peel back the glossy veneer of Hollywood's golden years and see the vulnerable humanity underneath. These mothers, fathers, and children, Loretta and Judy, Orson and Michael, Marion and Patricia, John and Allegra, Jack and June, Hedy and James, Babe and Dorothy, Louie and Sharon, Jerry and Susan, and all the others. Their experiences invite us to reflect on the costs of maintaining appearances and the enduring importance of truth and acknowledgement. And in a way, bringing their stories into the open now serves as a posthumous setting right of the record.